Good morning. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about the endothelial tissue, nitric oxide synthase, and L-Arginine as it relates to the current public health problem. Just want to welcome you back. Come on in. We're going to do this live on a Saturday here. Got some really good studies that I'm super excited to share with you that actually Chris Masterjohn shared over on Instagram. So I think it's important that we're all sort of collaborating and sharing preventative strategies, because we've heard over the last several months, and in fact the last 20 months, that the hospitals are overfilled, that there's no intensive care unit beds for individuals who come in with, say, a heart attack or other non-COVID-19 related challenges and so forth, acute challenges. So we need to free up hospital beds. And this study was published earlier this month. I'm going to share this with you on the screen. Just really fascinating. And what's really even more interesting here is the mechanism of action linked with how L-Arginine affects potentially individuals with COVID-19 and their endothelial tissue and their vascular function, and how it all sort of comes together in terms of putting the pieces of the puzzle with regards to the risk factors that are linked with severe disease and mortality and hospitalization, like obesity, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, and diabetic complications, high blood pressure, in individuals who don't exercise and who are sedentary. So all these things are sort of coming together, and we now know that this critical sort of process here, and what you're seeing is how L-Arginine impacts nitric oxide synthase, which affects this critical functional unit of your entire cardiovascular system, including the heart, known as the endothelium. So the endothelial tissue is a functional tissue. It's involved in not only helping to mitigate some of the oxidative stress and inflammatory damage, but it helps obviously with the microvasculature and blood flow and circulation. So this could potentially, sort of help us mechanistically tease apart how to help people when it comes to prevention, exercise, and all that. So I think this stuff is really, really fascinating. It's obviously important to continue to share and evolve this conversation. And again, we're hearing so much more about hospitals being overfilled. There's no hospital beds, all of this. But yet a study like this that found that just 1.66 grams of L-Arginine, which by the way is like nothing. If you go to GNC or Amazon or your gym and you get a pre-workout or an intra-workout product, usually it's like 4 to 5 to 6 grams of L-Arginine. Remember, this is really affordable. We're hearing a lot about the cost of how much it costs, with individuals going to the hospital and how insurance premiums are going up. Well, why isn't the media talking about this really low-cost intervention? Again, the study that we're going to dive into very, very soon was only in 100 subjects, but what they found is that about 77% of the people in the L-Arginine group were able to leave the hospital early compared to individuals who didn't get this. And we're going to dive into these details. Really fascinating stuff. I want to welcome you back on a Saturday. It's Mike Mutzel here. Grateful and honored that you're here. So look, if you're enjoying this content, this live content, what you can do is leave a comment in the chat. Just let me know where you're from. And if you're enjoying this content, you can hit that like button. We're going to talk about a bunch of new studies here. In fact, this study, we're going to dive into this very, very soon here about how overnight fasting can enhance lifespan, at least in animals. And then there was another study on exercise we're going to dive into. We're going to get into all this stuff, friends. I do just want to let you know that there is a new formula that we've been working on behind the scenes. It's the Electrolyte Sticks. It's a multi-ingredient electrolyte formulation that also features creatine with red mineral salt, magnesium, potassium, and all of that. So you can pre-order this over at Myoscience. Here's a screenshot of what's in the ingredients. Every stick is really well packed in this multi-ingredient combination formula. Pre-order it, check it out below. We're going to be diving into electrolytes and hydration and exercise performance a lot in the upcoming months. Okay, so I have a bunch of notes here I want to get into and dive into some of your live questions as well. But let's get into first talking about what L-Arginine is and how it affects the nitric oxide synthase and what that does in the endothelial cells in the body, okay? So let's get into that right now. Okay, and again, the point of talking about this is this sort of culminates and synthesizes all of the data that we know about the risk factors with people who don't exercise, obesity, smoking, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, and all of that, because the endothelium is a critical sort of functional unit of your cardiovascular system that is commonly dysfunctional in people who have these diseases that are linked with high risk of having severe outcomes and dying and being in a hospital. So the critical role of the endothelial dysfunction in microvascular and macrovascular complications in diabetes and obesity and hypertension has been well characterized in the literature. So it turns out that the importance of endothelial nitric oxide synthase in inducing vasodilatory functions and endothelial function and its links with these diseases has been well characterized. So this supports the role and the rationale for pharmacological targeting of the endothelial nitric oxide synthase pathway as a novel strategy to prevent various challenges with chronic diabetic kidney disease, hypertension, obesity, inactivity, and so forth. So the endothelium is not just a monolayer of endothelial cells that lines the entire vascular system, but it also exerts significant autocrine, paracrine, and endocrine functions modulating vasodilation, smooth muscle cell growth and migration, and inflammatory responses. Many of these effects are mediated by nitric oxide. Okay, so what you're seeing here, let me just make this really big for all of you. While I'm talking, I'll move myself out of the screen. I don't care. You don't have to see my face, right? Who cares? You just want to see the science. You're like, dude, tell me how potentially L-Arginine might be effective. Should you have, maybe you want to enhance your exercise performance or whatever. But here's how L-Arginine functions in the body and how it affects your vascular signaling in this critical unit that we've been talking about known as the endothelial tissue. So nitric oxide protects against endothelial cell damage induced by cytokines such as tumor necrosis factor alpha and provides antithrombogenic effects by blocking the release of von Willebrand factor. So these are factors involved in the clotting process. So L-Arginine is important, obviously, potentially for that. And we know clotting issues are a complication linked with this particular viral infection. So indeed, a defect in the production or activity of nitric oxide promotes key features of endothelial dysfunction, such as vasoconstriction, platelet aggregation, smooth muscle cell proliferation and migration, and leukocyte adhesion and oxidative stress. So I think, this is important. Really important stuff. So nitric oxide is formed in the endothelial cells and is a precursor of L-Arginine, right? So from its precursor of L-Arginine, via the enzymatic action of endothelial nitric oxide synthase, eNOS, which is localized at the plasma cell membrane. So the protein caveolin-1 binds to calmodulin to inhibit the activity of eNOS and so forth. So that's more complicated stuff that we don't need to get into. Anyway, let's get into the cofactors. So cofactors such as tetrahydrobiopterin and NAD-nicotinamide, adenine dinucleotide phosphate, that's NADPH here, are important regulators that contribute to nitric oxide production. So you can see here what happens when BH4 goes down. Okay, so let me just maximize this. You can see here. So you have L-Arginine going on to make to influence nitric oxide and synthesize endothelial nitric oxide. But what happens is if the cofactors aren't there, then you have challenges. Now these challenges manifest in terms of increased vascular permeability, altered vascular tone, reduced blood flow, enhanced signaling of oxidative stress and free radicals, and changes in what's known as the secondary messenger signaling. Okay. So that's some of the details. And that's just like background and perspective. If you've never tried taking L-Arginine and citrulline products, I mean, this is something that's been available, honestly, for like over 20 years. Various pre-workouts and intra-workouts, if you go to the gym, if you're into exercise and things like that, when you take these, you'll notice what's known as a pump. So a more vascular pump. You're moving blood around, lactic acid, all of that when you're exercising your muscles. And so again, it makes sense here that overweight people, obese individuals, people with hypertension, people who don't exercise, if they already don't have good vascular tone, and then that vascular tone is being damaged by the byproducts of inflammation that are linked with this infection, that it makes sense that they would benefit from taking something like L-Arginine. So let's get into the details of this study. So again, here's the study. For those of you that are just listening here and you're doing other stuff on your Saturday, which is great, the title here of the study is The Effects of Adding L-Arginine Orally to Standard Therapy in Patients with COVID-19, a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled parallel group trial, results of the first interim analysis. So again, This should be front page news, friends. I know it's only 100 people, but we're hearing so much about, well, the hospitals are overfilled. You can't even, if you're pregnant and you want to deliver a baby, well, there's no hospital beds for you. Okay, CNN and MSNBC and all the networks, why aren't you promoting this study? All right, I mean, this should be front page news. No one's talking about it. Okay, so let's get into the details of this particular study. Sorry, my notes are all over the place. Okay, more background and perspective here. Here's what I'm going to do is just put this right on the front page of the screen so you can see this and read along as I'm going through this. Okay, so as we've already talked about, L-Arginine is a critical precursor, but it's also involved in ammonia detoxification. So its roles are pleiotropic. So L-Arginine doesn't just solely affect sort of nitric oxide synthase and so forth. It's involved in affecting and detoxifying urea, which is a byproduct of ammonia detoxification. So that could be part of the roles here. Okay. So as we continue on here, at the 10-day evaluation, 71% of the patients in the L-Arginine arm and 44% of the patients in the placebo group had their respiratory support reduced. However, a significant difference was noted and detected 20 days after randomization. Strikingly, patients treated with the L-Arginine exhibited a significant reduction in hospital stay versus placebo. Again, shorter hospital stay at just 1.66 grams of L-Arginine. For our YouTube censor gods, we're not saying L-Arginine cures COVID. All we're talking about is if a low-cost, readily available solution was available to help free up hospital beds, we should be promoting it, should we not? Yes or yes, we should be promoting it. Okay, so strikingly, patients with L-Arginine exhibited a significant reduction in hospital stay versus placebo, with a median percentage stay of 46 days in the placebo group versus 25 days. Friends, and this was a p-value of 0.0001. You're like, oh my gosh. So you have 1.66 grams of L-Arginine literally cost nothing. You have this very low cost product, which I think is probably underdosed. Maybe you could crank it up to 3 grams. I don't know. Anyway, these findings were also confirmed after adjusting for potential co-founders, including age, duration of symptoms, comorbidities, D-dimer, as well as the antiviral and anticoagulant treatments. So interpretation of this interim analysis, adding oral L-Arginine to standard therapy in patients with severe COVID-19 significantly decreases the length of hospitalization and reduces the respiratory support at 10 days, but not at 20 days after treatment. You might be like, well, why not after 20 days? Because a lot of the people that were in the L-Arginine arm had already left the hospital. Okay, this is insane. Okay, so during hospitalization, 684 patients required intensive care. So that was 21% of the patients. 331 required mechanical ventilation, and 88, unfortunately, died. That was 2.7% of hospitalized patients died. Okay. They go on and talk about all these different, parameters and so forth. So among those who survived, 3% were discharged to post-care, morbid obesity. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reading to you from my notes here. I apologize. I wanted to dive into this study next, and this was the factors linked with deaths and hospitalization. Okay, so fascinating stuff here on L-Arginine. Now, what does this have to do with other factors? Is this a study on exercise? Yeah, so this was a study on exercise, okay? Now, this is why I think it's important, because we know that regular exercise can increase the functionality and the health of the endothelial tissue and increase expression of endothelial nitric oxide synthase and enhance tetrahydrobiopterin and all these processes that we just talked about right here earlier in this live session here, where we talked about how L-Arginine goes on to make endothelial nitric oxide synthase and how that can affect the vascular tone in the microvascular circulation and so forth. But it turns out that regular exercise has been shown to do this as well. And that's why you're seeing the results of this study that found that, well, guess what? Regular exercise, what it actually did was change a lot of immune-related parameters. And this was one of the first case studies to support the immune response to exercise following SARS-CoV-2 infection and vaccination in an otherwise 42-year-old healthy individual. And they show that acute exercise mobilizes SARS-CoV-2 specific T cells. So it's not only that exercise affects the endothelial tissue, but that exercise dramatically impacts the immune response in individuals and these immune cells that are very specific to neutralizing and reducing viral load here. So I thought this study was just really fascinating. And what I'll do is as I'm diving into this is leave this image just right here. This image really sort of tells a story about how exercise can be a tool, but yet we're not really hearing about exercise. We're not really being told that we should encourage exercise. Employers are mandating all sorts of things upon their employees, and the government is doing this. And now, governors are doing making children do certain things, but yet where's the incentive for things like exercise? Because here, as you can see here, how high-intensity interval training, what it does, and this is within the blood, these are these endothelial cells that we were just talking about as it relates to vascular function and dysfunction and complications and L-Arginine and all of this. But this is the inflammatory milieu that is linked with this particular viral infection, and how short-duration high-intensity interval training has been shown to decrease the expression of various inflammatory cytokines and signaling molecules that compromise vascular tone and are linked with increased risk for clotting and dysfunction. So, this article goes on to say exercise transiently increased the circulating levels of SARS-CoV-2 neutralizing antibodies, likely due to an increased lymphatic flow and the return of protein-rich fluid back to the blood compartment. We purport that increases in lymphatic flow with exercise may facilitate the transportation of neutralizing antibodies to facilitate viral clearance. Gosh, who would have ever thought that exercise could be helpful? My goodness. Okay. So the findings from this case study indicate that a single exercise bout mobilizes large amounts of SARS-CoV-2 specific T cells with broad TCR diversity against COVID-19 antigens and an enhanced ability to respond and to recall antigens. The findings do support the narrative that every exercise bout promotes neutralizing antibody transportation and mobilizes the redistribution. I can't talk today. I don't know why. Highly functional virus-specific T cells with the potential to increase immune surveillance and facilitate viral clearance. Okay. So again, I'm wondering why the objective journalists have not yet really been talking about exercise and sharing some of these findings, like this particular study right here. How vascular inflammation is a problem in people who have long-haul COVID, and how short-duration, high-intensity interval training might be a natural therapy that we should be promoting to reduce the severity of long-haul symptoms. So, friends here, I love sharing this research with you because, unfortunately, you're not hearing about it in other places, and that is unfortunate. So what I want to do is just check in with you, see if you find this interesting. I mean, I think this stuff is fascinating because it's just like a reminder about basic physiology, a reminder about how L-Arginine and L-citrulline affect the endothelial system and nitric oxide synthase. Like, that's just a good reminder. And then knowing, hey, look, on days when you don't feel like exercising and you just got to think, well, gosh, you know what? Exercise is good for so many different aspects of health, and it's been shown to obviously affect this inflammatory mess within our vessels. I should make that decision. I should just go at least start to exercise. And once you actually get to the gym or you go outside and you start walking, although sometimes you feel tired, you feel lethargic, you're like, do I really want to be doing this? Like, what am I thinking? Once you start to move, you're like, okay, I feel good. I can sometimes it's just the act of initiating the process of exercise that is hard. Okay, so what we're going to do is get to your live questions here. Thanks for being here, friends. Thanks for hitting that like button. Thanks for leaving a comment. Okay, so lots of great questions coming in here. So what I'm going to do, friends, is literally I put together this presentation this morning. So it's like 9:20 here Pacific time. So what I'm going to do is link some of these articles. Just give me a little bit of time after the fact, and then we'll put those in the description below. So I will absolutely do that and share with you all these different studies on exercise, like this study in this healthy 42-year-old. Fascinating stuff here, and then this study on L-Arginine. So I'll just, as we're getting to some of your questions, what I'll do is I'll just link the study here that we were talking about and get into that. So what's going on here? Okay, what are your thoughts on L-citrulline? Well, let's get to the image here. So L-citrulline is involved in the process. So when I personally take like a pre-workout that has L-Arginine, I'm looking for L-citrulline in this, and also folate as well. So you can do 5-MTHF. So there's a lot of different L-Arginine, L-citrulline products out there. So usually you want to have that together. But what's interesting is this particular study in the COVID-19 individuals they didn't have citrulline in there. It was just the L-Arginine, which is fascinating. Okay. What's going on, guys? What else do we have? All right, lots of questions on the citrulline and so forth. So you can buy them together. Yes. Yeah, I don't have any specific products to, we've been working over at Myoscience on a pre-workout and an intra-workout, but I don't have any specific formulas out there to recommend to you guys here. What other questions do we have here? Okay. So there's a question here from Johnny Nice. Johnny says, doesn't L-Arginine feed viruses as opposed to L-lysine? Yeah, so this is interesting. I mean, every virus probably uses different amino acids in their ability to replicate and all of that. So I'm not really sure if there is any differentiation here or protective effects of L-lysine versus arginine. That was really more for herpes simplex 1, I believe, was where L-lysine has been shown to be effective. But I'm not sure on that with this particular bug here. But interesting stuff that like the study found. I mean, obviously it was a randomized crossover, double-blinded study, found that just 1.66 grams of arginine did improve outcomes. So that's really what we're talking about here. There's a lot of like tissue culture studies and cell studies that find various things. Clearly, L-Arginine has been shown to be effective. Okay. Let's get in. Okay, so we have another one here. Roused About for Fun says, just got back from a 10-mile trail jog. Wallace Falls is flowing, and I found my bottles of L-Arginine and we'll be sure to take it. So just going out on a trail run or hiking or walking or lifting weights, that is going to improve this whole process, friends. So what we're doing is when you exercise, you are training your endothelial cells to function better, to perform better. And so that's what's important. This is why exercise should be talked about more. This is why I'm so frustrated with the lack of emphasis on exercise. Again, I'm just going to leave this image here so you can see how what exercise does within your vessels. It's just so phenomenal. So if you do not exercise, you might also want to consider L-Arginine. If you're a former smoker, current smoker, if you have diabetes, and this is where I think if we can sort of transition the conversation a little bit as we continue with your questions here about low carb diets and intermittent fasting and low glycemic index diets, the complications linked with diabetes and hyperglycemia and hyperinsulinemia, one of the challenges and links with one of the complications linked with that is one of the tissues and organ systems that becomes a target of hyperinsulinemia and hyperglycemia is the vascular endothelium itself. And so this is where endothelial dysfunction is very common, especially in men with insulin resistance, prediabetes, and iron overload. This is a big thing. This is why blood work regularly is so important, friends. Pretty much every single male client that I've ever worked with has increased levels and thick blood. And this is a challenge when it comes to, obviously with COVID-19, but longevity in general. So if you're a male, you need to look at your hemoglobin, hematocrit, red blood cell, RDW, all of that, and iron and ferritin. A lot of men, and I found in postmenopausal women, build up iron. And this can worsen diabetes and insulin resistance, but this also damages the vessels. And so we're working on a masterclass. We're going to do some live training on interpreting your labs to talk more about this. So if you're not on our email newsletter, you definitely got to check that out over at highintensityhealth.com. Opt in so that you're there, so that you get notified when we launch this. We're going to do 2 live trainings and really get into this in a greater depth. So you can work with your healthcare practitioner and possibly start donating blood and discover, if you're a candidate for blood donation, because this is a major problem. The endothelium can become challenged and can become sort of augmented or can be damaged by hyperinsulinemia, glucose, but also iron. Really important that we sort of understand this. Okay. Let's get into even more questions. Thank you, Brian, for the super chat. Top 5 HIIT exercises that people can start doing with. Okay, so Brian wants to know in the super chat here, what are some things that he can do? Well, what I will do in the cards here is link a workout that my family and I did. My daughter's actually sitting right next to me as we do this video on the beach. A friend of mine, Donnie Monolitica, shared this with me. Really great, easy beach workout. So you can do a full body beach workout. There's a million HIIT training type workouts that you can do, but you want to think multi-joint movements. So you can do running, sprinting, walking, uphill, anything that's going to get your heart rate sufficiently elevated. But I'm a fan of just like on full body weight type days, Turkish get-ups, for example. You take a kettlebell that's 30, 40 pounds. I actually shared this on Instagram a couple weeks ago. Turkish get-up, and you're supersetting that with maybe push-ups, or you're doing air squats. There's so many things that you can do, but I would suggest definitely incorporating the legs here. So with sprinting, with lunges, with squatting, deadlifting, the legs are really important for a few different reasons. The blood flow tends to become more stagnant, especially in the legs. We know that individuals who have diabetic challenges, chronic kidney issues, blood flow, microvascular disease, and things like that, it really starts to affect the legs in a negative way. And interestingly, the legs become more insulin resistant first compared to the muscles in the upper body. So you always want to think about your legs. So you're moving your legs, you're walking, you're squatting, because again, they're just below, they're away from the heart, and the venous return may not be so good. So that's what I would suggest there. Brian, it's a great question. I don't have specific HIIT workouts, but outside of that beach workout and some things that I've shared on Instagram, but there's a lot that you can look at, and there's a lot out there. Okay. Okay. Hope says, I've recently heard that taking BCAAs is good in the short term, but bad in the long run for longevity. So, the longevity gurus and things like that take things out of context. Branched chain amino acids they can help with mTOR signaling. Leucine in particular can help with muscle protein synthesis. So the thing is, we don't want to chronically overexpress mTOR. It's this balance. So branched chain amino acids, protein in general, is helpful in contextual applications. For example, after exercise, for individuals who are bedridden, after you get a surgical procedure or something like that, or you twist your ankle so you can't move around, you want to increase muscle protein synthesis to help recover and prevent loss of muscle mass. But if you're trying to optimize longevity, do you want to be taking this stuff 24/7? Every hour, a BCA drink or protein? No, you don't. So it's all about context, friends, and so that's what is really important. Okay, Jasmine says, love the knowledge. Hey, thank you for that. I noticed that every video you're questioning why the media aren't talking about these things. Yeah, am I surprised? I'm just disappointed because the media for the last 20 months has talked about saving lives and has criticized, say, Ron DeSantis in Florida, or criticized people, spring breakers, criticized kids for playing outdoors and talking about how they're risking everyone's life. But yet their bias is such that they don't ever cover these low-cost interventions or even talk in depth about exercise or these different studies that have been published. So it's just like this media bias is just absolutely terrible. Okay. Matthew says, surely amino acids are always going to be available sufficiently for viral replication, as amino acids are continuously used for bodily protein. Okay. Yeah. So viral replication is not only contingent upon amino acids. There's other factors like glucose that viruses depend upon. So this is important. Okay, Kyle says, I've been told that NAD is also helpful for long haulers. What are your thoughts on that? I haven't dove into that particular research. I'm not trained or haven't worked with a lot of people with long haul COVID, but it could be helpful. Yeah, again, this study on exercise was actually was important. There's been several studies on exercise with long haul COVID. So we should be recommending walking, hiking, yoga, things like that, meditation, low carb diets, all of that. Hey there from Poland. Thank you for being here. Michael. Okay. Steven says, I take L-Arginine and L-Citrulline in order to lower my blood pressure. Great idea on that. So, okay. JM says, let's see, what else? Okay. 4 Green Frog says, I've been going to the gym 3 to 5 days per week for a year and a half. Amazing. Good job for you. I started taking L-Arginine several years ago. I'm not obese. I do not have heart disease or type 2 diabetes. Okay. Well, it's still good that you go into the gym, even though you don't have those conditions. However, do you really need to be taking L-Arginine every single workout? Probably not. You could cycle it on and off, take it periodically. That could be helpful. Okay. 2 Brain Cells says autophagy, exercise, mTOR, rest plus recovery. Yeah. Great way to sort of think about this. We want to sort of balance, this ebb and flow of build and repair, and then go for an extended period of time without food to enhance longevity. And so this is why I'm a huge fan of early time-restricted feeding. I'm going to dive more into the findings of this study later on this week. We're going to dive into that. But again, we want to put things in context. You don't want to be growing all the time, and you don't want to be catabolizing all the time. So autophagy is good, but you don't want to enhance autophagy 24/7. So this balance between growth and repair, I think is important. Hey there from Australia. What's going on? Okay. L-Arginine can also worsen allergies and asthma and lead to cold sores. This is why they wouldn't want to promote it. I do my best to stay away from it. Okay. Well, Joe, if you were in the hospital on a ventilator, would you be worried about a cold sore? I mean, let's just be real. So again, this binary thinking, we got to move away from that, friends. We need to understand the context. If you have severe COVID, the last thing on your mind is a cold sore. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be rude, but again, this thinking of arginine bad, BCA is bad. Like, come on, we got to stop. Again, this is a contextual application here. So please, Joe, and everyone, let's think better and not just think of these binary terms. We're talking about, again, hospitals being overfilled and no beds for delivering babies, okay? If we have an intervention that has been shown to be helpful and it's very affordable and accessible, why isn't the media talking about it? Okay. Thanks for the super chat here. The Patriotic Runner says, recently came across your YouTube, Instagram page. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate that. You're up there with Joe Rogan in terms of being, exposing info. Well, thank you for that. I don't know that I'm necessarily in that category, although I do love Joe's work and everything that he's doing. The scary thing about when you're talking about this stuff, and I have friends, part of the reason why I'm sharing this is I'm sharing later today a video on Rumble about some interesting stuff that you need to check out. So if you're on Rumble, hop on over there, and then I'm going to drop it as an audio only as well. There's some stuff that I just simply cannot post here on YouTube, but I want to share that with you. So thank you for being here. And also, if we're not yet connected on email, definitely hop on over to High Intensity Health. Opt in for the blood work cheat sheet, friends, because I share a lot of cool stuff on email as well. So I want to thank you for that, the Patriotic Runner. Okay. Doesn't L-Arginine come from L-Citrulline? Yeah, so this is a great question. I'm not the world's reigning L-Arginine expert, but it obviously is a precursor. There is shared metabolism in the production of nitric oxide and so forth. So, but they are slightly, obviously different molecules. But L-Arginine requires some of these different cofactors in its ability to make nitric oxide. So yeah, this is a great question here. Okay. Low Carb and Liberty says, Mike, all of your studies you cite publicly accessible. They're hidden behind paywalls. The studies that I cite, sometimes they're open access. Sometimes they are hidden behind paid walls and so forth. This study, totally open access right here. This study on L-Arginine, you can find this, and I'm going to update the show notes, friends, later today. This study I had to actually have my friend Frida Tehran, who does all the finding of these articles for me. So I find them and I say, hey, Frida, can you get me the full text PDF on this so that we can share it? And so Frida, thank you for doing that. But a majority of the studies related to COVID, actually, thankfully, are open access, which has been really cool. So Okay, if you or anyone you know or help with Iowa land grabs, check out okay, cool. So there's some property rights stuff going on there in Iowa. Thank you for sharing that. Simply Fit says, recently recovered from Rona. Notice when I coughed, blood saturation will get higher. Oh, okay. So I think what you're saying is when you have a pulse oximeter on your finger and then you cough, you're noticing the pulse ox is changing. Is that what you notice? That's interesting. It would be interesting to notice what happens to your pulse oximeter when you breathe less. We've done a lot of work with breath work, and we've talked a lot with Patrick McEwen and James Nestor on this podcast before, Mark Brahenna. So remember, breathing less actually can help to increase levels of carbon dioxide, which can offload more oxygen from hemoglobin and help. So hyperventilation followed by retention breath work might be helpful. So that would be interesting there as well. Okay, Brian with the super chat. Brian, thank you for that. Brian says, I've been suffering with COVID-19 symptoms for 18 months. Dude, I'm sorry to hear that. That totally sucks. I've tried everything, and the only thing that has made it stop was keeping my phone in a Faraday bag. Dude, that is wild. Did everyone hear that? Like, did you see this comment? Brian, thank you for sharing that. And that is super interesting. When I go camping, I put my phone in a Faraday bag. And friends, you can go to Amazon and just find a Faraday bag and put your phone in there. I think it's great to do in the bedroom. So, I know a lot of people early on were talking about 5G and all this sort of stuff, but Brian, you bring up a great point. I think that non-native EMFs obviously impact human physiology, but that is super fascinating. Brian, are you exercising? Have you tried this L-Arginine? I mean, maybe it's too late to consider that in terms of your long haul, but fascinating stuff. I want to thank you for the super chat and thank you for sharing that. Okay. Is your name the same on Rumble? I think it's just Mike Mutzel on Rumble. I don't think it's High Intensity Health. I've only posted one video, but later today you're going to get a really good video, hopefully. Look for Mutzel, Mutzel. Okay. What's the difference than St. John's wort, says Jasmine. So St. John's wort affects, I believe it's a cytochrome P450 enzyme that is involved in serotonin resynthesis. I believe it's been a long time since I've looked at that. But St. John's wort does potentially have some impacts in terms of seasonal affective disorder and so forth. I'm not very familiar with that, to be honest with you. Okay. What else do we have here? Dimitri says, does hiccups improve your levels of serum oxygen? I'm not sure on that. I've heard that. I'm not really sure on that. So, yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure, friends. Okay. Matthew says, many long-term symptoms are probably psychosomatic. You know what? Matthew, you bring up a good point. And I got a lot of flack for saying that I just do not believe in long-haul COVID. So you all know that last December I got COVID. Look, we're all going to get exposed to this. This is endemic. It's on every single continent on the entire, throughout the world on planet Earth, right? So we're all going to get exposed to this. So, if you believe something to be true, it's probably going to be true for you. So I just literally just do not believe. I never even entertained the idea of long-haul COVID. I did experience a little bit of fatigue for a couple of weeks afterwards, but I was totally, fine. No symptoms outside of that. So, I think your mind is really powerful. And so if you consume a lot of fear-based media, you're going to be scared. If you constantly believe, oh my gosh, like 30% of people who get infected have long haul, guess what? You're probably going to be one of those 30% of people, right? So the mind is really powerful. Think about how you want to manifest your dreams and your vision and your goals. Like if you think, oh my gosh, I'm always going to be poor. I've always been poor. I've always been fat, so I'm going to be fat. Guess what? You're going to be fat. So your mind is very powerful. Every day before you go to bed, and bodybuilders do this, wealthy entrepreneurs do this, business owners, I do this all the time, is visualize being successful, visualize being healthy, being very grateful. I mean, these things are really powerful. Your mind is so powerful, friends. So try not to buy into all the media fear-mongering and things like that if you can. Okay, I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you for hitting that like button. Just one last reminder on these new electrolyte sticks. You can pre-order these. You buy one, you get one free. We're going to ship these early November through Myoscience. Again, this is a multi-ingredient combination formula that no one has ever put together before, featuring creatine paired with electrolytes and Redmond real salt. Again, this has been studied by different universities throughout the world, this combination of electrolytes with creatine. We're one of the first companies to make this commercially available, pairing these combinations. Here's the ingredient profile, super clean. One of the only electrolytes that will be available that is featuring real salt. A lot of companies are taking USP sodium from China, putting in the electrolytes. You want real salt, and then we're also pairing that with creatine, friends, because creatine and taurine are involved in the hydration response. So if you want to pre-order, hop on over to Myoscience. In this pre-launch, you buy one, you get 100% free. So that's going to be the biggest discount that we'll ever offer on this. These sticks are travel friendly. They're impermeable to the elements of moisture and all that, so you can bring them with you. So pretty cool little product, and I'm excited to share that with you. But I'm excited that you watched all the way through. Thank you for being here live, and we will catch you on a future live session down the road. Have an awesome rest of your weekend, and thanks for your super chats. Thanks for your comments. We'll catch you all soon. Bye now.